right, so the pharynx, we've already basically talked about the pharynxes, but this is basically a space that's divided into 3 spaces that is utilized by both the digestive system and the respiratory system. Okay, so there are 3. We've already kind of been through this, but there are 3 pharynxes. You have the nasopharynx, and that's above the soft palate, so superior to the soft palate, and this is respiratory only. Okay, and then we have the oropharynx, and that starts at the soft palate and extends to the hyoid bone. Okay, so we have the soft palate here, so everything up here in this light green is nasopharynx. Okay, from here to here is oropharynx. All right, and the oropharynx is going to kind of mix respiratory and digestive, because here's your oral cavity. Food's going to come in here, and you've got this space here that's going down towards the trachea. So you've got air here and food here. So oropharynx has both. And then we also have the laryngopharynx. And that's from hyoid bone to the cricoid cartilage. So this pink down. So this also is going to have digestive and respiratory function. So both of these are part of the digestive and respiratory systems. So you have air coming down here to go into your trachea, and then you have the epiglottis here, which will go down and block the trachea so food can go down the esophagus. So the trachea is here, and the esophagus is here. Okay. All right, so swallowing the act of swallowing is called deglutination. Deglutination. And it has 3 stages. So it has 3 stages, one of which is voluntary, and the other two are involuntary. So voluntary meaning you have control of it. So the first stage is called the oral or buccal stage. And it is voluntary. So this is where the tongue mixes food. You're chewing and all that. Saliva's getting into the food and the tongue is moving it around. Helps to mix it. So the tongue mixes the food in your mouth, in the oral cavity. And with the saliva, it makes the bolus. And then it is pushed, which is pushed voluntarily into the oropharynx. All right, the second phase is the pharyngeal phase. So in this phase, this is involuntary. So it stimulates the swallowing control center. And where is the swallowing control center? The swallowing control center is, of course, in the medulla oblongata. And it forces the bolus into the esophagus. All right, the third phase is called the esophageal phase. And again, this is involuntary. And this is where muscular contractions, and this is around the esophagus. The esophagus has smooth muscle around it. So the muscular contractions of peristalsis. This is the squeezing of the tube to squeeze the food along down to the stomach. So the peristalsis that will move the bolus down the esophagus. And into the stomach. So when you're swallowing, you go through these three phases. The first one is voluntary. You're chewing up the food, and you do that voluntarily. You're chewing the food, the saliva's coming out, you're making the bolus, and then you physically, voluntarily use those muscles, the muscles of the tongue, and you swallow and force that food back into the oropharynx. From there, the throat basically takes over, and you go into the pharyngeal phase. That was the oral phase. The pharyngeal phase is involuntary, and the swallowing control center of the medulla takes over and forces the food, the bolus, into the esophagus. And then the esophageal phase is where the peristalsis, again, this is involuntary, so the smooth muscle of the esophagus through peristaltic contractions move the bolus down the esophagus. So food will go down the esophagus no matter what. Even if you're standing on your head eating, it will still move down the esophagus to your stomach. There are basically, come up here, let's use a different color, I'll use red. So there are 17 muscles that contribute to swallowing. And these muscles are connected to the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve basically, when you're actually, if you want to check the vagus nerve, the vagus nerve is in control of the gag reflex. It provides the gag reflex. So putting your finger down your throat or like towards that is a way to check the functioning of the vagus nerve. So if you gag, then the vagus nerve is working. Okay, so that's about it for swallowing. So next we'll talk about the GI tube.